I still remember the exact moment my son stalked mid-sentence. He was telling me about a lizard he'd seen in the backyard that morning, green, tiny, missing half its tail, and his eyes were wide and his hands were doing that thing where he can't talk fast enough to keep up with his own excitement. And then my phone buzzed on the counter, and something about the way I glanced at it must have changed my face, because he just stopped, looked at me, didn't finish the story. He was 6. He didn't have the words for what he saw, but he knew. That was the beginning of it, or maybe not the beginning, maybe just the moment I finally felt what had been building for months. By the time it was over, my sister-in-law had lost something she'd spent 2 years trying to build, and my husband had made a decision that nobody in his family expected. Not even me. My name is April. I'm 31. I married my husband Ben 6 years ago in a small ceremony in his parents' backyard, his mother's idea, which at the time felt generous. We have 2 kids. Milo is 6 and Camden is 4. They are loud, specific, deeply weird in the best ways. Milo catalogs insects. Camden refuses to wear socks with seams. They are the kind of children who make strangers smile in grocery stores and then immediately say something mortifying. Ben works in commercial real estate. I manage the back office of a physical therapy practice. We are not wealthy. We are not struggling. We are the kind of people who plan carefully and treat each other well and try to leave rooms better than we found them. Ben's sister is Vanessa. She married her husband Greg 3 years ago. Greg sells high-end outdoor furniture, the kind with 4-digit price tags and names that sound like European vacation destinations. Vanessa works part-time doing interior staging. They don't have children. They have opinions about children. They have opinions about children. Vanessa is not cruel in obvious ways. She doesn't say sharp things out loud. She does something quieter and, I've come to understand, more deliberate. She creates situations. She sets up circumstances that exclude you and then looks surprised when you notice. It started 8 months before any of this came to a head. Small things. Family dinners where she'd book a reservation at a restaurant with no kids' menu and seemed genuinely puzzled when Milo and Camden had trouble sitting still through a 2-hour meal. A spa date planned for the women in the family. Me, her, Ben's mom. On the same afternoon, Ben had an out-of-town work thing, and I had no childcare. She'd forgotten, she said. She was so sorry. I always said it was fine. I always found a way to make it work, or let it go, or swallow the particular tired feeling that comes from being managed by someone who smiles while they do it. Ben noticed before I said anything. That's how he is. He doesn't ask a lot of questions, but he watches. He came home one evening after a dinner I'd attended alone, the kids with a sitter, me the only one without a partner, because Vanessa had scheduled it for a Tuesday when she knew he had a standing work call, and he sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "She does this on purpose, doesn't she?" It wasn't really a question. I didn't answer right away. I peeled the label off my water bottle, which is something I do when I'm thinking. "I don't know," I said finally. He looked at me steadily. "I think you do." Maybe I did, but knowing something and being willing to say it out loud are different things. And at that point, I was still holding on to the idea that it was easier to give people the benefit of the doubt. I stopped giving Vanessa the benefit of the doubt the night she called about the lake house. Ben's parents own a property upstate, a lake house they've had since before Ben was born. 3 bedrooms, a dock, a fire pit. Every summer, the whole family does a long weekend there. It's one of those traditions that has never been formally discussed, just assumed. It's where Ben and Vanessa grew up spending summers. It's where Milo caught his first fish 2 years ago and cried because he felt bad for it, and then cried harder because he didn't want anyone to think he was soft. I was loading the dishwasher when Vanessa called, late enough that the kids were in bed, early enough that I wasn't. I almost didn't pick up. "I wanted to talk to you before I talked to everyone else," she said, which is always how she starts things she's already decided. She explained it carefully. She and Greg had been talking about the lake weekend, and they'd been thinking, she kept saying, "we," but the planning was clearly hers, about making this year's trip a little different. More of a grown-up thing. Just the adults. I turned off the water. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It's just that the house is small," she said. "And the kids can be a lot. We love them, obviously. But Greg and I were thinking it would be nice to have one trip that was just the adults relaxing. Your parents-in-law are getting older. They deserve a peaceful weekend. The way she brought in my in-laws like they'd asked for this, like she was doing everyone a favor. So Milo and Camden aren't included, I said. Not a question. She paused just long enough. It's not about them specifically. It's just the vibe we're going for. The vibe. Our kids have gone every summer since Milo was born, I said. I kept my voice flat, which is harder than it sounds. I know, and it's always been wonderful, she said, warm, reasonable. But we thought this year could just be different. Everyone needs a break sometimes. I asked her who everyone was. She said she hadn't talked to Ben's parents yet. She wanted to make sure I was on board first. That part stuck with me. She hadn't talked to Ben's parents. She hadn't talked to Ben. She called me at night when Ben was in the other room to get my quiet agreement before the whole thing was presented as already settled. I told her I'd talk to Ben and get back to her. Of course, she said. I just thought it would be easier coming from you. I stood in the kitchen for a while after we hung up. The dishwasher was running. One of Camden's drawings was taped to the fridge, a horse with 7 legs that she'd explained to me was running very fast. I looked at it for a long time. Ben was in the living room reading. I sat down next to him and told him everything. He listened the way he always does, completely still. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Our kids have been going to that lake every summer of their lives." I know. She called you specifically. Not me? I know. He set his book down. What do you want to do? I don't want to go without them, I said. I don't want to sit at that lake pretending everything is fine while our kids are home wondering why they weren't invited. He nodded. Then we're not going. We told Vanessa the next day. She wasn't surprised exactly, but she was displeased in that practiced way she has, where the displeasure is wrapped in politeness so you can't quite confront it directly. She said she was sorry we felt that way. She said she hoped we'd reconsider. We didn't. What happened after that was slower and more exhausting than I expected. Ben's mother called. She'd heard something, from Vanessa, because of course, and she wanted to understand what was going on. I explained it. She listened, and then she said something that I've thought about many times since. You know how Vanessa is. She doesn't mean anything by it. I've spent a lot of time with that sentence. Doesn't mean anything by it. Like meaning is the only measure of harm. Like you can do damage accidentally and it still doesn't count. I told her gently that regardless of what Vanessa meant, the effect was the same. My children felt it, and I wasn't willing to participate in a family trip that treated them as inconveniences. She sighed. She said I was being sensitive. I said maybe, but I was also being their mother, and those two things weren't in conflict. The calls kept coming for a while. Ben's dad, who is a quiet man and usually stays out of things, texted Ben directly to say he thought it would be a shame if the family didn't all go together. An uncle left a voicemail that used the phrase, "making mountains out of molehills," 3 times. Ben's cousin sent a long message about how family togetherness was more important than any one disagreement, which was rich coming from someone who had skipped the last 4 family events without explanation. Ben answered some of them. I answered fewer. After the first week, we mostly stopped answering the ones that weren't direct questions. Vanessa sent the lake house details to the family group chat 2 weeks later. Arrival times. Packing suggestions. A note about bringing your own towels because she'd found a great deal on new ones and didn't want anyone using the old ones. She sent it like we hadn't spoken, like everything was decided. I showed Ben. He looked at it for a long time. Then he put his phone face down on the counter and said, "Okay." Just that. Okay. I didn't ask him what he meant. I'd learned not to ask him questions when he got that particular calm. The weekend of the lake trip came in late July. We took the kids to a water park instead. It was the kind of gloriously chaotic day that exhausts you in the right way. Sun and chlorine and Milo trying to drag us onto every slide. Camden refusing to go on any of them, and then pouting when we didn't make her. We came home sunburned and happy. The kids were asleep before we reached our street. I was cleaning out the cooler when my phone started going. Not buzzing, really, more like it was seizing. Calls from Vanessa. From Ben's mother. A text from the cousin who never shows up to anything that said only, "What is going on?" I walked to Ben's office. He was sitting at his desk, calm, as always, but the kind of calm that has an edge underneath it, like something just barely held. "They called you," I said. "Greg called me," he said. 3 times. I looked at the phone on his desk, face down. "What happened?" I asked. Ben was quiet for a moment. Then he turned to me and said, "You remember the Alderton project?" I did, vaguely. Ben had mentioned it earlier in the year. A large commercial development, the kind of deal that takes months to negotiate and involves layers of financing and approvals, and people Ben rarely talked about at the dinner table. I remembered him mentioning it because he'd said it was one of the more complicated deals he'd worked on in a while. "Greg has been trying to get a contract with one of the developers on that project," Ben said. "Outdoor furnishings for the common areas. Significant deal. He's been working on it for months." I felt something shift in the room, quiet, like pressure. "Ben, I'm one of the brokers on the Alderton project," he said. "I don't control the whole thing, but I have relationships with the people who make those vendor decisions. I've been on calls with them for 6 months." I sat down in the chair across from his desk. "You never told me," I said. "I didn't know how connected it was until recently," he said. "Greg never mentioned what project it was for. I figured it out about a month ago." "What did you do?" I asked, though part of me already knew. He looked at me steadily. "I withdrew my recommendation." The room was very quiet. I could hear the kids' white noise machine through the wall. "Greg got a call this afternoon," Ben said. "The vendor committee decided to go a different direction. He wanted to know if I knew anything about it." "What did you tell him?" I told him I made a business decision based on my professional judgment about who I want to work with. My phone buzzed again. Vanessa this time. I didn't pick up. "Ben," I said slowly, "you didn't do this just because of a lake weekend?" He shook his head. "I did this because my kids have been treated like an afterthought by his wife for 2 years, and when I tried to give people the chance to do the right thing, nobody did. They told us we were being sensitive. They told us the kids wouldn't notice." He paused. "They noticed. Milo asked me last week why Aunt Vanessa never wants them around. I hadn't known about that conversation." "He asked you that?" "In the car," Ben said, "on the way home from his grandparents' house." He said it very calmly, like he'd been thinking about it for a while. Something tightened in my chest. Milo and his careful questions. Milo, who noticed everything and said it quietly when he finally said it at all. "What did you tell him?" I asked. I told him that wasn't true, that some people just have a harder time showing it. He looked at me. I didn't like lying to him. I picked up the phone when Vanessa called the 4th time. Her voice was different than I'd ever heard it. The polish was gone. She sounded younger somehow, and scared in a way that had nothing to do with me. "Do you know what Ben did?" she said. "He told me," I said. "That contract was going to be the biggest thing Greg has ever closed. We've been counting on it. We put a deposit on a house, April. A house." I let that sit for a moment. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I was, in the specific way you can be sorry about a consequence without being sorry it happened. "This is insane," she said. "This is over a vacation. Over kids at a lake house. It's not over a vacation." "Over kids at a lake house," I said. "It's over 2 years of your kids not existing to you. It's over calling me at night to get my agreement before Ben could weigh in. It's over Milo asking his father why his aunt doesn't want him around." Silence. "I didn't know he said that," she said finally. "People notice things, Vanessa. Even 6-year-olds. Especially 6-year-olds. She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice had changed again. Less panicked, more careful. "I didn't think it was a big deal. The kids are young. I thought they wouldn't remember." "They remember," I said. "Not the logistics. Not who was invited and who wasn't. They remember how it felt." She asked if there was anything she could do. I told her that was a question for Ben and for Greg, not for me. I told her that if she wanted to repair something with our children, that was also something she'd have to do herself, directly, in a way that meant something to a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and not just to the adults watching. She said she didn't know how to do that. I said I believed her. And I said that might be the most honest thing she'd told me in a long time. Greg and Ben had a conversation that I wasn't part of. I don't know exactly what was said. What I know is that Ben did not reverse his recommendation and Greg found a smaller contract with a different developer, and the house they put a deposit on fell through. They found an apartment instead. I heard this from Ben's mother, who told me in the careful tone she uses when she's not sure whose side she's on. Vanessa didn't call again for 3 weeks. When she did, she asked if she could come over. She came alone on a Saturday morning while Ben took the kids to his parents' house. I made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table where Milo's lizard drawings were pinned to the corkboard and Camden's artwork covered most of the wall to the left of the window. And Vanessa looked around at it like she was seeing it for the first time. "I was jealous," she said eventually. "I waited. You have this whole life," she said. "The kids, the chaos, the all of it, and everyone always talks about Milo and Camden. At every dinner, every gathering, my mother-in-law lights up when they walk in. And Greg and I have been trying to have a baby for 2 years and nothing has worked, and I couldn't stand being in rooms where all anyone wanted to talk about was your kids. I hadn't known about the trying. She hadn't told anyone. So you excluded them," I said. "I thought if they weren't there, I could just not feel it for a weekend." She looked at her hands. "I didn't think about what it would teach them. I wasn't thinking about them at all. I was thinking about myself. It wasn't an excuse, but it was real, and I had not expected real. You should have told someone," I said, "what you're going through. That's something people can actually help with." "I didn't want help," she said. "I wanted it to not be happening." We sat there for a while. The coffee got cold. I told her that what she was carrying was genuinely hard and that I was sorry she'd been carrying it alone. I also told her that it did not make what she did acceptable, and that the person she owed the most to was not me, but 2 small children who had started to wonder if their aunt liked them. She nodded. She cried, briefly, and then stopped herself. She came back 2 weeks later with Greg. They brought a small gift for each kid, nothing extravagant, just things they thought about. A bug identification book for Milo. A set of fabric scraps for Camden, who'd been obsessed with making things lately. They sat on the living room floor. Vanessa looked at Milo and said, "I need to say something to you. I haven't been doing a great job of making you feel welcome, and that was wrong. You and your sister matter to me, and I want to do better." Milo considered this with the gravity that he applies to most things. Then he said, "Okay, do you want to see my lizard drawings?" She said yes. She looked at every single one. Camden climbed into Greg's lap within 4 minutes, which is not something she does with people she doesn't trust, and I filed that away quietly. Things didn't go back to normal, because there was no going back to what normal had been. What settled in instead was something more honest. Vanessa and I are not close the way sisters can be close, but we are direct with each other now in a way we never were before, and I find that I prefer it. Ben's mother stopped calling it oversensitivity. She hasn't named what it actually was, but she stopped using that word, and that is something. Ben has never said he regrets his decision. When I've asked him, not pushing, just checking, he says the same thing each time, that he doesn't choose business partners based on convenience, and that people who treat children as inconveniences are telling you exactly who they are. I don't feel victorious about any of it. I want to be clear about that. There was nothing satisfying about watching Vanessa's plans fall apart, and there was nothing I wanted from the fallout except for my children to know, somewhere in the part of themselves that will carry this forward for the rest of their lives, that they were worth protecting. Milo finished telling me the lizard story eventually. A few days after all of it, when things had quieted down and the summer felt like summer again. He found me in the kitchen and picked up right where he'd left off, as if no time had passed. The lizard, the missing tail, the theory that it had escaped something. He told it seriously, and I listened seriously, and when he was done, he seemed satisfied and went back outside. That was enough. That was the whole thing, really. If you've ever had someone make your children feel like they were too much, you know the specific kind of tired it leaves in you. You also know that the moment you stop swallowing it is the moment something shifts. Not just for you, for them. They may not have words for it yet, but they're watching to see what you do. They're deciding, quietly, what love looks like when it has to cost something. It costs something. That's the part no one tells you. But it's worth it every time. I've thought a lot about what actually happened here. Not the contract, not the lake house, not the phone calls that came in all at once that Saturday evening. What actually happened was much simpler and much older than any of that. Vanessa made a choice. Then she made another one. Then another. And each one, taken alone, could be explained away. The restaurant with no kids menu, the spa day with impossible timing, the cheerful group chat message sent like nothing was wrong. Individually, they're small. Together, they were a pattern. And patterns have weight. They accumulate. And at some point, the weight becomes something you can't keep pretending isn't there. That's the thing nobody warned me about when I became a mother. It's not the big dramatic moments that test you. It's the small ones. The ones where you have to decide, quietly with no audience, whether you're going to let something go one more time. I let things go for 2 years. I told myself I was being gracious. I told myself I was keeping the peace. But peace that costs your children something isn't peace. It's just a postponed reckoning. Ben understood this before I said it out loud. That's what I keep coming back to. He watched and he waited, and when the moment came, when Milo sat in the car and asked in his calm, careful way why his aunt didn't seem to want him around, Ben stopped waiting. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, out of clarity. He decided that who you work with, who you recommend, who you extend your professional trust to, those are not neutral choices. They reflect something about what you value. And he wasn't willing to extend that trust to someone who had spent 2 years making his children feel like a problem to be managed. Milo didn't know any of that. He just knew that his dad listened to him in the car, really listened, and that something changed after that. Kids don't need the explanation, they need the action. They're watching to see what the people who love them are willing to do. What I carry from this isn't satisfaction. I want to be honest about that. Watching Vanessa's plans fall apart wasn't something I wanted. What I wanted was for my kids to grow up knowing that the people closest to them would not trade their dignity for comfort. That's a harder thing to give than people realize. It requires you to be willing to be unpopular. To have your mother-in-law use the word sensitive like it's a flaw. To not answer phone calls for a week while people who stayed quiet when it mattered suddenly have a lot to say. The part that stays with me is Vanessa on the living room floor, looking at Milo's lizard drawings one by one, actually looking, while Camden climbed into Greg's lap without being asked. Children forgive in real time when you give them something real. They don't need grand gestures. They need to feel like they count. I think about that a lot. About what it means to count. About how we teach children, without ever sitting them down and explaining it, what love actually looks like when it costs something. April and Ben didn't win anything, they just refused to lose something more important. That's the whole lesson. It doesn't need to be complicated.